already know the feeling. You do not need me to describe it in clinical language or wrap it in scientific terminology. You know it in your body. In your chest, you know it well. In the sudden, inexplicable heaviness that settles over you like a fog rolling in from somewhere you cannot see. One moment you were driven, focused, alive with a particular kind of electric energy. And then, within minutes, something collapsed. The ambition drained out, the clarity dissolved. The thing you were going to do today, the person you were going to call, the work you were going to attack with everything you had, it all retreated behind a wall of gray, flat, motivationless nothing. You told yourself you were just tired. You told yourself you would feel better after you rested. You told yourself this was normal. But here's what nobody told you. What you felt in those minutes was not tiredness. It was not weakness of character. It was not laziness. It was a precisely orchestrated biochemical collapse, a cascade of hormonal events that your body triggers automatically, measurably, and with devastating consistency, beginning approximately 7 minutes after ejaculation. And if you have been repeating this cycle without understanding what it is doing to your brain chemistry, your stress hormones, your motivational architecture, and your long-term capacity for drive and ambition, then what you are about to hear is going to reframe your entire relationship with this experience. Stay with me, because this is the conversation that explains so much that you have been carrying without a name. To understand the crash, you first need to understand the peak, because the biochemical collapse cannot be fully appreciated without understanding the height from which it falls. Sexual arousal triggers one of the most powerful neurochemical activation sequences the human brain is capable of producing. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation, motivation, and reward, floods the nucleus accumbens, the brain's primary reward center, at levels comparable to those produced by cocaine and other powerful stimulants. This is not metaphor or exaggeration. Neuroimaging studies have confirmed this comparison directly. Norepinephrine surges, sharpening focus and elevating physical readiness. Testosterone pulses upward in the bloodstream. The sympathetic nervous system activates fully. Heart rate elevates, blood pressure rises, sensory acuity sharpens. The entire organism enters a state of peak biological mobilization. This is the peak, and it is genuinely extraordinary from a neurobiological standpoint. The human brain, in full sexual arousal, is operating at one of its highest states of activation and resource deployment. And then ejaculation occurs, and the collapse begins. Here is what I need you to understand about what happens next, because most men experience this collapse their entire lives without ever having a framework for what is actually occurring inside their brain and body. What I am about to walk you through is the exact sequence, hormone by hormone, neurotransmitter by neurotransmitter. Once you see this map clearly, you will never be able to unsee it. Stay locked in. The first and most immediate biochemical event following ejaculation is a massive prolactin surge. Prolactin, a hormone produced by the pituitary gland, best known for its role in stimulating milk production in women after childbirth, rises in men immediately and dramatically following orgasm. Studies measuring prolactin levels in men before and after ejaculation have found increases of 400% or more within minutes of completion. This prolactin surge is the biological off switch. Its primary function is to terminate the sexual activation cycle, to signal the brain that the reproductive act is complete and that further pursuit of sexual stimulation is neither necessary nor appropriate. It suppresses dopamine release, reduces testosterone availability, and initiates the neurological transition from peak activation to refractory quiescence. In the short term, for a man who has engaged in actual reproduction, this is biologically sensible. The mission is complete. Rest and recovery are appropriate. But for the modern man, whose ejaculation is divorced from reproduction, occurring in patterns of frequency and context that have no evolutionary precedent, this prolactin surge arrives not as a gentle transition to rest, but as a biochemical sledgehammer applied to a motivational system that had nothing to do with reproduction in the first place. The project you were working on, the business you were building, the conversation you needed to have, the training session you were committed to. None of these were the target of the prolactin system, but they all get hit by it anyway, indiscriminately, completely. Prolactin is the first wave, but it is not the most damaging one for the ambitious man trying to build something with his life. What comes next? The dopamine receptor, downregulation, and the cortisol relationship. This is the part that explains why repeated cycles of this crash compound over time into something that looks exactly like chronic underperformance, depression, and the slow erosion of the man you intended to become. Do not go anywhere. Dopamine does not simply drop after ejaculation. What happens is more structurally damaging than a temporary reduction in dopamine levels. The brain, having just experienced a dopamine flood of extraordinary intensity, responds by reducing the number and sensitivity of dopamine receptors in the reward circuitry. This is called downregulation, and it is the brain's attempt to maintain homeostasis in the face of repeated overstimulation. The consequence of this downregulation is not merely that you feel less motivated for a few hours. The consequence is that your baseline capacity to experience motivation, satisfaction, and reward from ordinary pursuits is temporarily but meaningfully reduced. The work that would have felt engaging before now feels tedious. The goal that would have felt exciting before now feels distant and abstract. The sense of purpose that should be pulling you forward has gone strangely quiet. Not because the work changed, not because the goal changed, because the neurological equipment you use to feel drawn toward meaningful pursuits has been temporarily degraded. This is not a character failure. This is receptor biology. But, and this is the critical point, when this cycle repeats daily or near daily over months and years, the downregulation is not temporary anymore. It becomes the new baseline. The man does not return fully to his pre-depletion receptor density between cycles. He habituates downward. Gradually, imperceptibly, across time, his capacity for natural motivation, natural satisfaction, and natural drive erodes. And he looks around at his life and wonders why nothing feels like enough, why he cannot sustain momentum, why he starts things with fire and loses the flame within days. Why he feels vaguely, persistently, inexplicably less than he knows he should be. Now let us bring in cortisol, because this is where the crash connects to something with consequences far beyond motivation, reaching into physical health, immune function, sleep architecture, and the fundamental biology of stress. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. Produced by the adrenal glands, it governs the stress response, regulates blood sugar, modulates immune function, and plays a critical role in waking alertness and the circadian rhythm. In a healthy hormonal environment, cortisol follows a precise daily curve. High in the morning to support waking alertness, gradually declining through the day, low at night to permit deep sleep and cellular repair. Ejaculation disrupts this curve. Research examining cortisol dynamics following sexual activity has found that the post-ejaculatory period is associated with elevated cortisol relative to pre-arousal baseline, particularly in the context of compulsive or habitual sexual behavior rather than relational intimacy. This cortisol elevation is not enormous in any single instance, but consider its cumulative effect in the man who is cycling through this pattern repeatedly, daily or near daily, across weeks, months, and years. Chronic low-grade cortisol elevation has a documented, well-researched, devastating effect on the male hormonal system. Cortisol and testosterone share a biosynthetic pathway and compete for the same precursor molecule, pregnenolone. Endocrinologists call this the cortisol-testosterone seesaw. When one goes up, the other comes down. The man who is chronically depleting himself is not just experiencing individual crashes. He is engineering a hormonal environment in which his baseline testosterone is progressively suppressed by chronically elevated cortisol. And he is doing this to himself repeatedly, without awareness, wondering why he feels perpetually below his potential. I want to stop here and say something that I think needs to be said directly. What I have just described is not a moral argument. It is not a religious argument. It is not someone telling you that what you are doing is wrong or shameful. It is a biochemical description of a cause and effect relationship that operates in your body whether you are aware of it or not. The question is simply whether you want to keep experiencing the effect without understanding the cause, or whether you want to take the wheel. That is the only question on the table. Let us talk about what retention does to this entire cascade, because the picture on the other side is just as precise and just as dramatic as the crash itself. When ejaculation does not occur, the prolactin surge does not happen. The dopamine receptors are not flooded and do not downregulate. The cortisol spike does not occur. The testosterone that would have been suppressed by that cortisol spike remains available in the bloodstream, continuing to support drive, focus, physical energy, and the masculine hormonal profile. But beyond the simple absence of the crash, something active and constructive begins to happen in its place. Dopamine, rather than spiking artificially and then crashing, begins to build along a different curve, a slower, steadier, more sustainable accumulation of motivational energy. The reward circuitry, no longer being flooded and downregulated, begins to sensitize upward. Ordinary pursuits begin to feel more engaging. Work becomes more interesting. Goals feel more real and more urgent. The sense of drive that had become a faint signal through months of depletion starts broadcasting at full strength again. This is the dopamine rebound that practitioners of retention describe in the second and third weeks. The sudden return of genuine enthusiasm for the work, the project, the mission. The feeling of wanting to build something, of waking up already oriented toward the day rather than having to drag yourself into it. This is not a placebo effect. This is receptor biology running in the opposite direction. Sensitization instead of desensitization. Recovery instead of progressive erosion. There is one more dimension of the post-ejaculatory crash that deserves specific attention, because it operates at the level of identity rather than just biochemistry, and its consequences are the ones men feel most deeply, even if they understand them least. The crash does not just reduce motivation, it temporarily alters self-perception. In the hours following ejaculation, particularly following compulsive or shame-associated ejaculation, men consistently report a specific psychological experience that goes beyond simple fatigue, a quality of self-diminishment, of seeing themselves and their ambitions from a slightly smaller, slightly less certain, slightly more doubtful perspective. This shift in self-perception is not a rational reassessment. It is a hormonal artifact. The same prolactin and cortisol dynamics that suppress physical drive also suppress the neurological substrates of confidence and self-efficacy, temporarily reducing activity in the prefrontal cortex regions associated with goal-directed thinking and elevating activity in the limbic regions associated with threat detection and self-protective withdrawal. In plain language, the crash makes you think smaller. It makes the obstacles look larger and your capacity to overcome them look smaller. And if this state is the one in which you make decisions about your life, your relationships, your work, your ambitions, then those decisions are being made from a biochemically compromised position that does not reflect your actual capacity. Imagine making the most important decisions of your life repeatedly from the floor of a hormonal valley rather than from the peak of your full biological power. Over years, without realizing that the floor and the peak are not the same place. That is what chronic depletion does to the trajectory of a man's life. Not in dramatic, visible ways, in the quiet accumulation of slightly smaller decisions, slightly lower targets, slightly earlier surrenders, that compound across time into a life that is measurably, heartbreakingly smaller than the one the man was actually built for. I want to speak to you now from a place that has nothing to do with hormones or neurotransmitters or receptor density. I want to speak to you about the version of yourself that you catch glimpses of sometimes. On the good days, the clear days, the days when something clicks and you feel the full weight of your own potential moving through you like a current. That version of you is not an accident. It is not luck. It is not a mood. It is you, operating without the crash. You at baseline, when the biochemistry is not working against you, when the dopamine receptors are sensitized rather than numbed, when the cortisol is not suppressing the testosterone that fuels your drive, when the prolactin has not pulled the plug on the motivational architecture you need to build the life you are here to build. That version of you shows up more consistently, not perfectly, not magically, but measurably and consistently more. When you choose to protect your energy rather than repeatedly drain it. The crash is real, the biology is real, the cumulative cost is real, but so is the recovery, so is the rebound. So is the man who emerges on the other side of the decision to stop cycling through depletion and start building something instead. You have felt the crash enough times to know exactly what I am describing. The only question now is whether you are ready to feel what the other side feels like. Consistently, sustainably, as your new normal rather than a rare lucky day. That decision is yours. It always has been. And it begins not tomorrow, not after one more time, not when the conditions are perfect. It begins the moment you decide that you are worth more than the crash. If this video cracked something open for you today, if it finally gave language and science to something you have felt in your body but never been able to fully explain, please give it a like right now. That single action helps this reach the men who are living this crash every day without understanding what it is. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is capable of extraordinary things and keeps wondering why he cannot sustain the momentum. This might be the most important 7 minutes of context he ever receives. Subscribe if you want to keep building this understanding together. Every video on this channel is designed to give you the clarity that changes the trajectory, not just the mood of a single day. And thank you for your time, for your honesty with yourself in watching this all the way through, for being the kind of man who chooses understanding over comfortable ignorance. That choice is already the beginning of the change. Stay clear, stay full. See you in the next one.